Okay. Puer Aeternus is in mythology is a child god who is eternally young. In the analytical psychology of Carl Jung, the term is used to describe an older person whose emotional life has remained at an adolescent level, which is also known as Peter Pan syndrome, a more recent pop psychology label. In Jung's conception, the puer typically leads a provisional life due to the fear of being caught in a situation from which it might not be possible to escape. The puer covets, or covets, I don't know how to pronounce that, covets, independence and freedom, opposes boundaries and limits, and tends to find any restriction intolerable. We can see this phenomenon in people who seem to not be able to choose anything. Admittedly, myself. If you can't decide upon something, it's most likely because you're almost always afraid to escape the situation that you might happen to put yourself in. In which case, every decision that you think of choosing becomes another tool to torment you in the future. Nothing, virtually nothing, will have a positive outcome. The phrase, I'm going to skip that. So, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung developed a school of thought called analytical psychology, distinguishing it from the psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud. In analytical psychology, the Puer Aeternus is an example of what Jung considered an archetype, one of the primordial structural elements of the human psyche. The shadow of the puer is senex, or senex, Latin for old man, associated with the god Cronus. Disciplined, controlled, responsible, rational, ordered. Conversely, the shadow of the senex is the puer, related to Hermes or Dionysus, unbounded instinct, disorder, intoxication, whimsy. Like all archetypes, the puer is bipolar, exhibiting both a positive and a negative aspect. The positive side of puer appears as the divine child who symbolizes newness, potential for growth, hope for the future. He also foreshadows the hero that he sometimes becomes. The negative side is the child man who refuses to grow up and meet the challenges of life head on, waiting instead for his ship to come in and solve all of his problems. These type of people always wish that someday their time will come, someday they will be freed of their chains, and they will become the great man that they ought to be. One of the main characteristics of these people are that they imagine the positive outcomes in scenarios where they choose not to take or don't know how to take. Like all archetypes, I read that. For the time being, one is doing this or that. It is not yet what is really wanted. And there's always the fantasy that sometime in the future the real thing will come about. That's what I mean. The puer always wants to protect and preserve the status quo. Every type of progression is progression towards an unwanted future. But one day something will happen unconsciously that will drive their life into a position that mirrors their expectations. The one thing dreaded throughout by such type of man is to be bound to anything whatever. Common symptoms of puer psychology are dreams of an imprisonment or similar imagery. Chains, bars, cages, entrapment, bondage. Life itself is experienced as a prison. When the subject is female, the Latin term is puella or puella. I don't know how to pronounce Latin, but if it were Spanish, it would be Puer Aeternus, imaged in mythology as Kore, Greek for maiden, I think, if that's how you pronounce it. One might also speak of Puer Animus when describing the masculine side of the female psyche, or Puer Anima when speaking of a man's inner feminine component. Most of modern psychological disorders or problems have already been discovered. And in order to discover some things, you have to go through them. I don't know if there is a possibility of escaping this situation, but overcoming it would be through conscious endeavors, if that makes sense. Now, right now, everything in my mind is just completely disorganized. But if I were to say it put it like this, sometimes when your conscious thoughts seep into your subconscious, that same thing starts to go in a loop, and until you resolve it, it will continue on presenting itself into your consciousness. Meaning, until you fix the problem consciously, I don't think the subconscious will ever let you be freed of that problem. So, instead of thinking or thinking of the positive outcomes of the decisions that you've never taken, you could go for another option, which is to not think about anything at all. I know that's not easy, but sometimes you just have to be stupid to overcome things. I know there's cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what I mean by that. You have to fix things in your consciousness to be able to fix yourself subconsciously. So that's I think that's what cognitive behavioral therapy is. In his essay, Answer to Job, Jung refers to Puer Aeternus as a figure representing the future psychological development of human beings. That higher and complete teleos man is begotten by the unknown Father and born from wisdom, and it is he who, in the figure of Puer Aeternus, vultu mutabilis albus et ater, representing our totality, which transcends consciousness. It was this boy into whom Faust had to change, abandoning his inflated one-sidedness which saw the devil only outside. Christ's "except ye becomes as little children" prefigures this change, for in them the opposites lie close together. But what is meant is the boy who is born from the maturity of the adult man and not the unconscious child we would like to remain. I don't think that Peter Pan syndrome, in the modern sense of it, definitely correlates to, does not definitely correlate to Peter Pan syndrome. Because Peter Pan syndrome is the popular psychology concept of an adult who is socially immature. The category of an informal one invoked by lay people and some psychology professionals in popular psychology. It is not listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it is not recognized by the American Psychiatric Association as a specific mental disorder. Most people, when they think of the Peter Pan syndrome, they think of the men who are not inept of choosing, but mostly are men who are unable to commit, right? So a Peter Pan syndrome, in its modern sense, is a man who acts like a child without having any commitment or any responsibility. They would go on to have a leisureful life and without having consequences of their actions. That's what they want to have. So the hookup culture. Most men would go on to have relationships and hook up with other women without wanting without wanting the responsibility that comes with having a girlfriend or a wife. But I don't think Puer Aeternus exactly means that. Or at least I don't know what Jung definitely puts it that way, but I think there is another aspect of the Puer Aeternus that they don't want to escape the consequences of their actions, but rather they are afraid of having or going through the consequences of the actions that they are unwilling to take. What that means is you might like a job, and if you like that job, you would be willing to go and work hard for it, right? You would try to develop yourself both intellectually and mentally and emotionally to fit into that job description. But the puer is afraid to take in that job description, for he is afraid that that job might not be the most suitable job for his personality. And every job is that for him. I know that kind of correlates to immaturity, but not exactly. Suffering is only meaningful when it serves a purpose. But if you don't condition yourself to bear through that suffering, for which you don't think it is meaningful for you, then you would not be so eager to suffer through the consequences of it. I know that doesn't make that the ideas in my mind are so disorganized, but we can continue on reading, right? Let's see what Jung means by that, or whatever anyone else means.